All right, am I ready to roll? Morning, everybody. Today is Daf Daled Maseches Yuma. We left off discussing. I don't know where we left off. We're discussing and talking about quarantining. Being in, I just like using the word quarantine just because it's due to times. So, anyways, when Moshe Machlokes by Yom Kippurim as to the source of where do we know that the Kohen Gadol had to be quarantined for 7 days prior. Once, as Machlokes in Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan learned that the source was from the Miluim. 7 days before, Aaron and Banav were quarantined for 7 days. 8th day from the Avodah, and Rish Lakish learned from Har Sinai. From Har Sinai brought the pasuk because 6 days before, and on the 7th day we added the 7th day just because perhaps Tuma might have been with his Tumas Beso, which is the top 2 words of the page in Dalet and Aleph. So we left off top line. Omar le Rabbi Yochanan le Reish Lakish. Says Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, Bishlam al Didi Yafin Miluim. It works well according to me that we learn from the Miluim. Why? It's because we learn over there Zev Zeh Mazin ala Kol Shiva. Both cases, both by the Paraduma and by the Kohen Gadol, we go ahead and we do sprinkling. We call from all the ashes of the from the previous paradumas. So in other words, they took ashes from previous paradumas and they used to sprinkle them on every day. Sprinkle the water from the ashes on them every day. Because there was also hazah from Miluim, right? They did hazah eladidcha, but according to you, and we'll soon see about what type of hazah there was by the Miluim. What did they sprinkle on Aaron? However, eladidcha, according to you, the afat misinai hazah b'sinai mihavi. There was no sprinkling done then. So if there's no sprinkling then, so where do we learn that there's sprinkling is done by these 7 days of hafrasha? Samarlei ay l'tamech minicha b'miluim bedam hacha b'mayim. In the case of the Miluim, it was blood, right? The blood was sprinkled on Aaron every day from the karbanos. However, but over here, in this case, we are sprinkling water. We are not sprinkling blood. So halakasha, the Tanya Rabchia, nichnasu mayim takas dam, right? No, it's not. That's not a big contradiction because really what we do is we substitute the blood that was sprinkled during the Miluim to water that's now sprinkled by every day of the 7 days before prior to the Paraduma and also 7 days prior to Yom Kippurim. But according to you, there was no hazah at all, right? No one says that the Moshe was sprinkled for the 7 days before, the 6 days before. We're going to get to that discussion today. It's only a chumrah. It's not a necessary deraisa. It's not learned from psukim. It's only a chumrah that we do in order to prevent any sort of tumah. Fine. Now, Tanya Kavasi the Rabbi Yochanan, Tanya Kavasi the Rish Lakish. We're going to have a brayso in support of Rabbi Yochanan, who says that we learn the 7 days of quarantine from the Miluim, and then we're going to also get into a brayso that supports Rish Lakish, and then we'll discuss actually the events of Matan Torah. Let's see. So first, Tanya Kavasi the Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, similar to what we've seen till now, says Bezois Yavo Aaron ala Kodesh. Right. So it says over there by Yom Kippurim, with this Aaron shall come to the Kodesh. So the Masha Amr Beinyan, right? Mahi. In other words, it says but this. In other words, that which we've been talking about will continue. So Mahi Beinyan Miluim. In other words, the same way by the Miluim, similar will be to the avodah of Yom Kippurim. And Ma Omer B'nei Miluim Aaron Pirish Shiva v'Shimesh Kol Yom Echad Moshe Masal Kol Shiva. So what was going on Miluim? So Aaron was separated for was in quarantine for 7 days. And then he worked 1 day, and then during those 7 days, Moshe basically taught him over the halachas, all 7, in order to educate him in the avodas. Afladoros. So too for generations, when it comes to Yom Kippurim, Kohen Gadol Paresh Shiva Mishamish Yom Echad. The Kohen Gadol once again will be quarantined for 7 days. Then he'll perform the avodah on 1 day on Yom Kippurim. And then they'll have 2 Talmidei Chachamim in lieu of Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? They were the basic Talmidim. Right? The same Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. They will also teach the one in quarantine, i.e., they will teach this Kohen Gadol, Afuki Tzedukim, to exclude any of the types of halachas that Tzedukim taught. And they used to go ahead and teach the halachas all 7 days, the Kohen Gadol, in order to educate him in the avoda. So therefore, from here we see that 7 days before Yom Kippurim, the Kohen Gadol was separated to Lishchas Parahedron. Now, so this is clearly we're learning from the Miluim, which would be support for Rabbi Yechon. And now, and it says, exchange mafrishin kohen gadol, kach mafrishin kohen surface apara, lishchas shal pnei habira tzefana mizracha. We saw this earlier. The same way that we separate the kohen gadol prior to Yom Kippurim, so too we separate the kohen who's going to go ahead and burn the ashes of the paraduma. Also separate him for 7 days into the little office or the chamber of pnei habira, which is with the northeast. And both the Kohen who's a Sarif Sapara and also the Kohen Gadol that's going to go ahead and perform the avoda, we sprinkle upon them the previous paraduma ashes. And if you say melum, they sprinkle blood, and here they sprinkle water. Once again, we just said earlier, right? The water is in place of the blood. And it says, "Kasher asa bayom hazet tziva Hashem lasos l'chaper aleichem." And furthermore, another proof that Yom Kippurim is learned for the Miluim. It says, just like it was done on this day. All right, so to Hashem tziva lasos l'chaper aleichem. So Hashem commanded to you when you provide atonement for yourself. So la'asos elamai sapara. So therefore, it says la'asos. It's a reference to the just like Miluim, 7 days of quarantine. So too. La'asos is a reference to the paraduma ashes, the sreifas paraduma, and the chaper elamai Yom Kippurim. And the chaper is that's to teach you also Yom Kippurim. There's 7 days of quarantining. Bezos. Now the first pasuk of that was brought in this brisa. Now we're going to analyze this brisa a little bit. Excuse me. In the introduction to Yom Kippurim, we brought the pasuk of the first part of the brisa. Right, the brisa brought two proofs. The first one was from Bezos Yavo Aaron al Kodesh. So now the Gemara says, can we darshan the word bezos right in this? So I v'hai bezos but the gufe the need for the pasuk because you have to teach him the par ben bakar lachatas v'ayla ola. It's teaching you the karbanos bezos with these karbanos. So you have to go ahead and bring right. You have to bring a par for a chatas. You have to bring a ram for an ola. So I'm going to say ila korban lechude lemakra bezeh or be'ela. Go over here and say bezeh with this, right, which is a zachar, or be'ela with these, the two karbanos, samai bezos. What does it mean? Bezos, right, singular and, right, and nekeva. So, shemamino, tarti must be both. You can learn both that these are the karbanos and also bezos, the same way you did by the Miluim. So too, you're going to quarantine for 7 days also by Yom Kippurim. Now the Gemara says, "My v'omer." What does it mean? V'omer. Why did they bring a second pasuk? So the Gemara says, "V'chitei Yom Kippurim kamahu deboy prisha." Maybe it was only the first Yom Kippurim, the only time when Aaron was doing the Yom Kippurim, maybe it was only then that it requires 7 days of quarantining, just like, right, we only find that one time when the Mishkan was inaugurated, it was only a one-time event. So maybe this Yom Kippurim was also a one-time event where Aaron, who was the Kohen Gadol, was separated for 7 days prior to Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippurim the Almalo, but any Yom Kippur that follows afterwards, or Inami or Kohen Gadol Kamahu Deboy Prisha, or maybe only the first Kohen Gadol, i.e., Aaron, required Prisha, about Kohen Gadol the Almalo, but a regular Kohen Gadol years afterwards would not require. So Tashma, therefore it says Kasher Asa. Therefore the pasuk says Kasher Asa. We bring the second proof to say that definitively for every generation or every year, for 7 days before the Yom Kippurim, we go ahead and quarantine the Kohen Gadol. Fine, that was the proof. That was the support for Rabbi Yochanan. Now we have a brayso that support of Reish Lakish. Now Reish Lakish learns from Yom Kippurim. Excuse me, sorry, take it back. Reish Lakish learns Yom Kippur from Har Sinai. All right, Har Sinai, the pasuk we saw yesterday. Right, the pasuk we brought at the bottom. Right, it says Vayishkon Kavod Hashem al Har Sinai v'chzu ha'anon sheishes yomim. Right, he was covered for 6 days. Then we said 6 isn't 7. 7 days was added because of his wife, not Moshe's wife, but just the Kohen Gadol's wife. Perhaps he was with her and she was Nida, right? So we see over there that he was in quarantine for 6 days prior to the giving of the Torah. Now, let's get into that. We're going to see a machlokas regarding the events that occurred then, right? Those of you who have the art scroll, right? There's going to be actually a very good table, right? If you like a sort of like a little cheat table. on 4b1. All right. So if you want to take over there between we have machlokes between Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva. So let's see. Tanya Kavase de Reish Lakish. We have a brayso in support of Reish Lakish. Moshe Allah ba'anan. V'nis kasta ba'anan. So Moshe went up in a cloud, and he was covered by the cloud. V'nis kadosh ba'anan, and he was sanctified, right, in the cloud. Kadei lakabel Torah l'Yisrael b'kedusha. In order to be makabel the Torah b'kedusha, Shnamar, as the pasuk says, Vayishkon kavod Hashem al Har Sinai, right, and says the Vayishkon kavod Hashem, the kavod Hashem, right, the glory, the kavod of Hashem was rested al Har Sinai, upon Har Sinai. Zehaya Maisa Achar Aser Sedibros. According to this opinion, which is going to be the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Glili, this is after the Aser Sedibros were given. In other words, the Aser Sedibros were given, and then Vayishkon kavod Hashem al Har Sinai. This is the beginning of Rabbi Yossi Glili, so I'm going to cheat a little and not cheat, but explain to you what we're going to see also later on. According to Rabbi Yossi Glili, okay, it wasn't that they got there. This is referring to the 6 days from Rosh Chodesh until the Torah was given. We'll soon see when the Torah was given. There's machlokes also between either the 6th day or 7th day. We learn that according to Rabbi Yossi Glili, okay, that they got the Torah right, or on the 6th. It's going to be the 6th according to Rabbi Yossi Glili, right? And then there were 6 days after that he was in that he was in seclusion, and he was quarantined for the 6 days after that. That was the Yom HaShishi started on the 6th day of Sivan, right? And then the Yom HaShvi on the 7th day is not referring to the 7th day of Sivan, rather referring to the 13th day, right? The 7th day after the Ser Sedibros were given, right? So 7th day afterwards, and those days were part of the Arba'im Yom, all right? That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Glili, all right? And the Gemara is going to go ahead and explain what I just said. And then it says, Rabbi Kiva Mir. No, it says Vayishkon Kvod Hashem Rosh Chodesh. What does it mean? No, and when they basically it started upon Rosh Chodesh, right? The Kvod Hashem was upon Har Sinai 6 days before, is referring to Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh, that's Rosh Chodesh Sivan, right? Turn the page, top of the page. And therefore it means, and then it covered the clouds. The clouds didn't cover Moshe, rather the clouds cover the mountain. Vayikra Moshe. Then he called to Moshe on the 7th day of Sivan, saying, Moshe and all Bnei Yisrael stood, right? It wasn't just given to Moshe, it was given to everybody. So why did he call it to Moshe? To give cover to Moshe, even though the Aser Sedibros were given to Bnei Yisrael. So according to Rabbi Akiva, right, this 6 days were actually 6 days prior to the giving of Matan Torah for Aser Sedibros, and therefore on the 7th day called out to Moshe, but also called out to Bnei Yisrael, called out to everybody to give the Torah. So the 6 days were actually before, right, the giving of the Torah, as opposed to Rabbi Yossi Glili, the 6 days were after the Aser Sedibros. And before we get into the machlokes of Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yossi Glili, Rab Nasan Aimer, Lo ba kasav el lamarik achila shtia b'shebemeyav. No, the reason why the 6 days wasn't necessarily to go ahead and to put him in quarantine, rather to empty him out from any food or drink, right, that were inside him. So the Summa Malachei Sharis. So in order that Moshe Rabbeinu will be like the Malachei Sharis. To put fear into Moshe Rabbeinu, Torah nitenas be'ema uberasas v'ziyah, that the Torah should be given with fear, and trembling and shaking v'ziyah, and also and trembling, right? These shaking and trembling, right? This the type of fear that Moshe had. That's why he was separated for 6 days. Shnemar's pasuk says, "Ivu as Hashem b'yira v'gilu berada," right? Right, you should go ahead and serve Hashem b'yira, right, with fear, right, and the gilu, right, and gilu is to rejoice, to be happy, right, berada, right, with trepidation. So my the gilu berada, what does it mean to rejoice with trepidation? So Ravada barmasna amarav, b'makom gilu sham te'ereda, right, in the place of simcha, in the place of gila, right, happiness, right, this joy, right. So too, there's a person should have some sort of trepidation or fear. Now, back to this machlokes between Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Akiva. So by comifli Rabbi Yossi Glili, Rabbi Akiva, but looks at the Hari tonight, it's actually based on a different machlokes. The Tanya learned in Brayso, b'shisha b'chodesh nitna Torah liYisrael. So Tanakama or the Chachamim over there say that on the 6th day of Sivan, the Torah was given to Bnei Yisrael. Right, that was the Aser Sedibros were given on the 6th day of Sivan. And Rabbi Yosi Omer b'Shiva. It was on the seventh day, right? The seventh day. What's the machlokes? Samadam or b'Shisha. The one who says was given on the 6 days. No, b'Shisha nita v'Shiva Allah. It was given on the 6th day, right? And then on the 7th day, that's when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the mountain. He didn't go up earlier. He went up then. It was given on the 6th. And then he went up immediately after, right? He called out, right? Then he went up. And the one who says on the 7th day, so B'Shiva Nita V'Shiva Allah, right? On the 7th day it was given, and the 7th day, Moshe Rabbeinu, went up for 40 days. Now, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Sever Katana Kama. So this machlokas as to when the Torah was given, we want to say the our machlokas of Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rabbi Kiva is based upon this machlokas as to when it's given. So Rabbi Yossi Haglili Sever Katana Kama. Rabbi Yossi Haglili, remember, Rabbi Yossi Haglili was the first opinion of the Brisa. He was the one who said basically that the 6 days we were talking about, right? On the 6th day, then Hashem called out on the 2nd day, right? On the 7th day, right? The pasuk of, right? Right. I mean, this pasuk we're discussing is the one from Shmos Chavdalad Tes Zayin, which says, I'm just reading the pasuk, Vayishkon Kvod Hashem al Har Sinai, Vachsu Ha'anan, right? And right, the Kvod Hashem was upon the Har Sinai, right? And it was covered with the cloud, Sheishes Yamim for 6 days, Vayikra al Moshe b'Yom HaShvi Mitochanan, and they called out to Moshe on the 7th day, right? So that's the pasuk we were discussing. That's and that the understanding of that pasuk is disagreed upon between Rabbi Yosef Glili and Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rabbi Kiva. So according to Rabbi Yossi Glili, he says, he holds like Tanakh says was given on the 6th day. That the Torah was given on the 6th day, right? Hilkach, therefore, this Maisa, when he called him for 6 days and then the 7th day, right? In other words, you were in seclusion, right, for 6 days. Those 6, he wasn't in seclusion before. He was going up and down before Aser Dibros to tell Bnei Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu was in seclusion before, right? It was only after, right? That's when Moshe Rabbeinu was in seclusion. Hilkach Zaya Maisa Achar Maisa Aser Dibros. That was after the Aser Dibros, Vayishkon Kavod Hashem al Sinai, and therefore it says, right, and then after the Aser Dibros, then it says Kavod Hashem was on Har Sinai, right? Vaychzu Anan Sheish Hashem the Moshe, and the cloud covered Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe was covered for 6 days after the Aser Dibros. Vayikra al Moshe b'Yom HaShvi, and he called out to Moshe Rabbeinu on the 7th day, i.e., right, a week after the Aser Dibros were given, right? The Kibbutz Shar Torah, in order to go ahead and be makabel the rest of the Torah, in order to receive the rest of the Torah, which was given on the 13th, right? Because if you think that Vayishkon Hashem al Sinai and then 6 days from Rosh Chodesh Sivan, right? And then the mountain was covered, right? Vayikra Moshe b'Yom HaShvi l'kibuli Aser Dibros. Moshe Rabbeinu come to get Aser Dibros on the 7th day. Hakibul Moshisha, right? According to him, it was already on the 6th day. Vaha Istalik on a Mashisha, right? Because that's when the clouds are no longer there. The clouds are only there for 6 days. And the 7th day, they sort of, lifted and Moshe, went up there. So it couldn't be because on the 7th day that happened, because the 6th day already occurred. So it must be, according to Rabbi Yossi Glili, it didn't happen. The 6 days were not prior to the Aser Dibros. Rather, the Aser Dibros were on the 6th. And on the 7th day was the beginning of the, and then from then, there was 6 days, and then on the 7th day is referring to the 13th. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi HaGlili. Rabbi Kiva Saver, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Kiva holds like Rabbi Yossi, not Rabbi Yossi HaGlili, but he holds like Rabbi Yossi from that machlokas as to when the Torah was given, and that according to Rabbi Yossi was on the 7th day. Therefore, it was on the 7th day the Torah was given to Bnei Yisrael, and therefore it would be understood as the 6 days before was referring to from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until 6 days, and on the 7th day was the Aser Dibros were given, which is sort of the pashtus of the pasuk when one first reads it. Fine. Now, getting back to our whole question of why we brought this in, machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish as to what the source of, or how do we know that they were quarantined? So Bishlam Rabbi Kiva, Haina Mishachas La B'Shiva Sar. Before we get to that, now, so Bishloma Rabbi Kiva, Haina Mishachas La B'Shiva Sar B'Tamas Nishtabru Haluchas. So according to Rabbi Kiva, it actually makes sense if you go ahead and do the counting, right? Because we know that the luchos were broken on the 17th of Tammuz, right? And therefore, if you count 40 days after from this date, is given. So according to Rabbi Kiva, right, they got the Torah, right? Everything was done on the, right? The Torah was given. It was all given on the 7th. So, why? Esvi the Sivan, because you have 24 more days of Sivan. But she said the Tammuz, and then 24 plus another 16 days of Tammuz. So Malul Arban Yaimin the Havi Bahar. Therefore, it's 40 days. Moshe Rabbeinu was on the Har. And then on the 17th, he came down. He saw the Chet Egel, and then he broke the Luchos on the 17th. So it makes sense. Rabbi Yosef Glili, but according to Rabbi Yosef Glili, who says he was separated for 6 days first, and then he was up there for 40 days, Varbim Dahar, and then he was 40 days in the mountain. He went up on the 7th day for 40 days. So therefore, it should really be that if you count from the 13th of Sivan, right, 40 days, it should really come out. There'll be approximately the 23rd when he came down when the Luchos were broken, and not the 17th. So Amalei Rabbi Yosef Glili Arbain Dahar Bahadi Shisha the Prisha, right? No, the 40 days are including the 6 days of Prisha. So the 6 days of Prisha are included. So therefore, the count doesn't start from the 13th of Sivan. Rather, the count could start at the same time as Rabbi Kiva did, and to say the count started from basically the 6th of Sivan. Fine. Omar Mar Vayikra El Moshe. So it says he called out to Moshe. So Moshe B'chol Yisrael Aimdim, right? So when he called to Moshe, so it says Moshe and all of Yisrael was standing. So Masala Rabbi Elazar. This is a proof of Rabbi Elazar. Damar Rabbi Elazar. Vayikra Moshe. Moshe Moshe. Right. When it was given to Moshe, it was really given to Moshe ben Yisrael. So why did it single out Moshe to go in order to go ahead and give cover to Moshe Rabbeinu? So Meisvei Asuk Hasha, it says Kol Lo. At one time it says Kol to him, and another time it says Kol Alav. Right? So, 1 second. No, 1 second. Let me just find the pasuk. It doesn't say kol lo, it says kol alav. Let me just, where is the pasuk? Looking for the pasuk on the side. All right, so it says Vayidaber Hashem Elav, right? So it says when he called to him, right? He called to him. So Moshe Shama v'Chayisrael Shama, right? So are you saying that only Moshe Rabbeinu heard, right, when the Seres HaDibros were given and Bnei Yisrael did not? So why did it say Elav, right? Why did it say only him? Only he heard and no one else did. So Lakasha Haba Sinai Haba El Moed. So it could be the one in Har Sinai. Maybe that's when everybody heard, right? And the other one was Ben Ol Moed, only Moshe Rabbeinu heard. Or you could say that the Riboy saying like Kasha Haba Kriya Haba Dibur, right? One is he called out to Bnei Yisrael that everybody heard, but when it would come to the Dibur, right? When it come to the speaking of it, right? That which was said was only heard by Moshe Rabbeinu and not heard by and it was not heard by the others. Rashi, 1 second. Right, it says, all right, Vayishma as Hakov Midaberi Love, right? That's the pasuk, right? That was the pasuk in Bamidbar Zion, right? The Gemara doesn't bring it down; just Rashi references that pasuk. Fine. Fine. Rabbi Zreika, Rami Kroi, Kamei de Rabbi Elazar. So Rabbi Zreika, he had 2 psukim before Rabbi Elazar that seemed to contradict one another. Some say Amar Rabbi Zreika, Rabbi Elazar, Rami, and some say Rabbi Zreika quoted Rabbi Elazar, saying that the psukim seem to contradict one another. See, one pasuk says, "V'lo yachol Moshe lavu el ol moed ki shachin alav hanan." Right? Moshe was not able to enter the ol moed afterwards because the cloud was there. See, another pasuk says, "Vayav Moshe b'zechanan," and Moshe entered into the cloud. So which one is it? So Malamda Shetavsa HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe VeViyubanos. Says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sort of grabbed him and brought him into the cloud. And debate Rabbi Yishmael Tana. So the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, they taught Never Kam B'Seich, but Never Lo B'Seich. It says B'Seich in both places. Vayavu B'nei Yisrael B'Seich Hayam. It says by Kriyas Yamsuf they went B'Seich Hayam. Vayavu B'nei and it says and over here it says B'Seich Hanan. So Malach and B'Shvil. Just like over there, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a path. Dechsiv V'Hamayim Lahem Chayma Afkan. So there was a wall there, right? And there was a path through. So to over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a path for Moshe Rabbeinu in the Anan. Vayikra Moshe Vayidaber. Says he called to Moshe Vayidaber. So Lama Hiktim Kriya Ladiber. Why does it say he called to Moshe and then he spoke? Just speak, right? So Lim Datarech Dercheretz, right? Shalo Yomar Adam Davar Lechaver Elim Kain Karuhu, right? That person should basically stop. He did not just necessarily speak to his friend unless he calls him first, right? It's like people many people lament, in today's day and age, that no one calls anyone anymore. People just text, and oftentimes you say, "Hey, can I call you?" You text someone, "Can I call you?" So you see over here, actually, that's derech eretz. Derech eretz is you should basically call someone before you start speaking to them, right? So, so over here it's saying that a person should not just start talking to his friend, but rather he should greet him first and say, "Hey, I want to, tell you something." Also, first, he should call him, and then he should speak. Right? Should say his name. Say, "Hey, I want to tell you something," and then tell. Lamor. What does it mean? Lamor. And here we see a lot of people naming in the names of their grandfathers. So Amar Rav Nasia, Barbarei de Rav Nasia, Mishmei de Rav Nasia Rabba. So it says Rav Nasia, the grandson of Rav Nasia, right? He was, I guess, named after his grandfather. Mishmei, in the name of Rav Nasia Rabba, the great Rav Nasia, another Rav Nasia. So Menaylo, in the Davar Chaver Shubabal Yemer. Where do we know that a person should not tell someone something someone said unless he has permission to, or until he tells him so? You can go ahead and say it. Right? And he spoke to him saying, in other words, that you can only go ahead and say when you have permission to go ahead and give over that information. Otherwise, you're over Bal Yomer, right? You don't repeat. And Michlal, the Tavayus, now going back to what we talked about before, right? So over here, it must be, right, that they hold that everything that was done by the Miluim, right, was ma'akev. One of the parts were not included. The Miluim, the inauguration, wouldn't have been good, right? The Itamar was taught Miluim Rabbi Yechon Rabbi Chanina. It was Machlos and Rabbi Yechon Chanina. Chad Omar Kol Kosav Behem Ma'akev Behen. One holds that everything you listen to Psukim was ma'akev. If one part was not performed, then it would be ma'akev. Chad Omar B'Davar Ma'akev L'Doros Ma'akev Behen. Shein Ma'akev L'Doros Ein Ma'akev Behen. Right. Only somebody that was ma'akev, right? L'Doros, right? No, it's for future generations. That is ma'akev by the miluim. But if it was not essential for in the future, then it was not essential for the miluim. So Tistayim, the Rabbi Yechanan, who the Amar Kol Kosim Hen Ma'akev Behen. Right. It sounds like Rabbi Yechanan is the opinion who holds. Remember, Rabbi Yechanan was the one who learned the avoda, right? The comparison of Yom Kippurim from the miluim, right? Because Midikamarle, Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Rabbi Yechanan, because Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yechanan, right? Right? He says, by the Miluim, if that's the case, then everything should be ma'akev, and he didn't answer to him, right? So it must be that he agrees with it, that it must be that everything was ma'akev. Right, because otherwise he could have just said, right, because Reish Lakish was asking Rabbi Yechanan, if that's the case, everything by Miluim, right, should be ma'akev, right? And if you're learning from Miluim, so everything by Yom Kippur should be ma'akev, right? So, but he didn't answer. He says, no, that's not true. It's not all ma'akev. So it must be that Rabbi Yechanan does hold that everything by the Miluim is ma'akev, and also in future generations, also even the 7 days to be in quarantine, tistayim. And yes, that is the case. It must be Rabbi Yechanan is the opinion who holds that everything that was done, even by the quarantining, both by Miluim and by Yom Kippurim, is ma'akev. All right, we'll stop here. Tomorrow, Mr. Shem, we will continue. I think tomorrow, right, we should go ahead. I will be, Mr. Shem, I will be heading back today. So tomorrow, the plan of those who want to join, I will